Hey, I can walk all over the brain. This is so cool for a starting screen. Okay, that's enough of that. Where's the new game? Oh, there it is. Okay, let's talk about Psychonauts. Psychonauts is yet another game I've heard of, but never played before until now. Like God of War, it also came out in 2005. Unlike God of War, it was not a major success when it first came out, though it was critically acclaimed. However, over time it did grow in popularity, and now has a fairly large cult following, with a sequel supposedly coming out later this year. So, was all the praise warranted? After playing through it, I'd say yes, for the most part. It's a really good game, but it's not without its flaws. In Psychonauts, you take control of Raz, a young acrobat who ran away from the circus in order to join a summer camp for young psychics. When he arrives, the teachers say that they can't just let him run away, and are contacting his parents to come pick him up. But they say that he can stay until his parents arrive. During his time at the camp, he interacts with the other students and teachers, making new friends and honing his psychic abilities along the way. However, he ends up getting involved with something much more dangerous, as it turns out that a set of mysterious villains are kidnapping the children and planning to take over the world. And so Raz must get to the bottom of things and save his fellow campers. There's a lot to like about this game. The strongest aspects are the characters and the art style. Each character is visually distinct with a quirky and likable personality to match. The character interactions are also very entertaining and humorous, and the game's sense of humor is also really good. I laughed out loud quite a few times, which doesn't usually happen when I'm playing a game, so props to the writers. The game also does a good job of balancing out the funny moments with more serious or even dark moments. And while the game has an overtly comedic tone, the more dramatic moments also work really well. This is definitely not a game for kids though. At first glance it might seem kid-friendly, but it has just enough mature content as well as some rather messed up moments that would not be good for a kid. I mean, one of the villains is harvesting the brains of the children for his own diabolical means, and both visually and conceptually this is something that would definitely freak out a child. I know that it would have freaked me out if I played this as a kid. The thing that really makes the game stand out is that the levels of the game are based around Raz entering the minds of those around him. Each mind is unique and wonderfully creative in design. The first few minds Raz enters are the minds of the teachers of the camp, and they're designed to train Raz and the player about the various gameplay mechanics, so they're relatively straightforward and organized. In the second half of the game though, Raz makes his way to an insane asylum, and the minds of the patients there are much more messy and surreal. In order to progress further through the game, Raz must enter their minds and help them deal with the various psychological problems that hold them back. And for all of them this is done in very unique and creative ways. For instance, one of the patients thinks he's Napoleon. Pretty cliche for a crazy person, but the way this issue is manifested inside his mind is actually really clever, as is what you have to do in order to help him. My personal favorite level takes place in the mind of a particularly paranoid patient, and it shows how he views the world. Not only is it funny, but I think it's a pretty accurate portrayal of how conspiracy theorists think the world works. I'm deliberately not showing footage of any of the later mind levels, because they're best experienced firsthand for yourself, though I will make one exception a little later. The core gameplay is pretty good, though the platforming mechanics aren't always consistent or reliable, and it can get a little frustrating at times. And the psychic powers you unlock as you play are pretty cool too. Honestly, there's a lot to like about Psychonauts, and it's easy to see the unique charm this game has to offer. But I do have one major issue with the game, namely it's a bit of a mess. To illustrate what I mean, let's take a look at another game, namely Spyro Year of the Dragon, which is, in my opinion, the best 3D platformer ever made. There's a lot of good aspects to this game, but one thing I really appreciate about it is that it's organized. It has a clear setup and structure, with 4 hub worlds and a certain set of levels for each hub world. There are only 2 types of collectibles, gems and dragon eggs, and this elegant design choice keeps things simple and flowing. The story unfolds at a natural pace as you make your way through the levels, and new gameplay mechanics and challenges are gradually introduced as you go along. In short, it's neat and tidy. Psychonauts, meanwhile, is kind of all over the place. It's got a bunch of different collectibles, including the figments, emotional baggage, arrowheads, mental cobwebs, memory vaults, psycards, and oh, there's also scavenger hunt items. And in the second half of the game, you can also collect the brains of the kidnapped children in order to return them to their owners. Some of the collectibles seem redundant, and the brains in particular kind of come out of nowhere. All of them are found within one area, the asylum, and by the end of the game, all of the children get their brains back regardless of how many you found. So it seems like a mostly pointless addition. I get that collecting them increases your health, but that could have easily been worked into one of the other collectibles. It's not just the collectibles that are all over the place. A lot of the gameplay mechanics feel a bit messy as well. As you make your way through the game, Raz unlocks numerous psychic powers, each one useful for different situations. But some are more useful than others, and it's almost random when you get some of them. And the game doesn't really do a good job of balancing them all out, making each one useful and memorable. Some of the powers, such as levitation and telekinesis, are consistently useful throughout the game. Others though, such as the invisibility, are much more situational. The clairvoyance power is abruptly introduced in one level with little ceremony, and while it is useful in that level, and can be used in other places, you won't really need to use it ever again. And the confusion ability could have easily been cut, since you only need to use it once as far as I can tell. The layout of the game is also a bit off as well. The summer camp is quite large and elaborate, with a lot of ground to cover and explore, but you don't actually need to explore most of it, and the second half of the game takes place almost entirely in the asylum, which makes one wonder why they spent so much time on the camp if you're not going to be there for most of the game. Also, the insane asylum is rather strangely designed. All of the patients are found in one area and might as well be in the same room, as you can go from one mind level to another with no break in between. That doesn't sound so bad, but after you do that, there's a prolonged and rather tedious and boring section where you're just ascending the abandoned upper floors of the asylum, and nothing interesting happens until you reach the top. It just feels like it would have made more sense to space the patients out a bit more to break up the monotony of getting to the top. One last issue I have with the game is the ending. Story-wise, I think it's pretty good, my only big problem being that the confrontation with Dr. Lobato, the guy who is harvesting the children's brains, is rather strange and anticlimactic. When it comes to the gameplay, though, the last level is a bit problematic. It combines Raz's childhood memories of the circus with the main villain's childhood memories of his father's butcher shop, giving us the meat circus. Those two words are infamous, as this final level of the game has a bit of a notorious reputation. After playing through it, I can say that this reputation is mostly warranted. But it's not quite as bad as I feared. For one, it's relatively short, and there are checkpoints at key spots. So while it is frustrating to get through, it could have been a lot worse. I don't know, I just remember how pissed off I got at games like Castlevania 3 with some of its bullshit challenges, and the meat circus just doesn't seem that bad in the grand scheme of things. The emotional moments of the story toward the end are really strong, and visually the meat circus is just as creative and imaginative as everything else in the game, and those two elements helped me to overlook the frustrating gameplay. In summary, while the game is a bit messy in its structure, and the ending sections have some problems, the charm and creativity of the levels and characters more than make up for it. I don't know if it's one of the best games ever made, but it's certainly one of the most unique games ever made. It's a delightful experience, and it absolutely deserves to be played. My final score is an 8 out of 10. Hopefully the sequel actually does come out this year and doesn't get delayed, given everything that's going on lately. Anyways, have you played Psychonauts? What did you think of it? Are you looking forward to the sequel? Whatever you think, be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you like what I do, feel free to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.